Welcome to the Rabbi and the Shrink. This is Dr. Margarita Gurri, your shrink, and this is my favorite rabbi,
Yonason, Goldson.
And the good rabbi and I are delighted today to have Tami Pyfer with us. Hi, Tami.
Hello.
Hello, Tami.
Tami is changing the world. She's inspiring everyone to have dignity instead of contempt. And in this world of cancel culture and hate speech and people who can't seem to listen because they're listening to their own thoughts or fears, she's come up with a group of enlightened individuals with an organization called Unite. And she has the Dignity Pledge and the Dignity Index. All right, Tami, how did all of this get started?
Well, I just wanted to stop at Tami's Changing the World.
I think
that would be
you
the great episode. Hopefully, the great people of America and people that are the exhausted majority is what they're called often in research. They're changing the world for the better. And I'm just happy to be part of this movement that I joined in 2020 during the pandemic. I was working in our Utah Governor Gary Herbert's office, his education policy advisor, and we were homebound. A lot of our activities were curtailed because of the pandemic, and I had some free time on my hand, and I connected with this group called Unite, Dr. Tim Shriver, who was leading the effort, and Tom Roschert, and I started volunteering, and I realized then that this was the next big thing for me. When I left the governor's office that year, it was his last year, I knew that I needed to be involved in this movement.
Well, I think you're right. The rabbi and I have been very impressed with your work. So tell us
that
about
phrase, the phrase, the exhausted majority. I haven't heard that before. That just sums it up so perfectly.
Us, right?
That's us. My first thought was exhausting majority as well.
Well, it's the exhausting minority, and that's why you have an exhausted majority.
Yes, exactly. All right, so tell us about your whole dignity movement.
So shortly before I joined Unite, and in early 2020, I had just read a book by Arthur Brooks called Love Your Enemies. And my husband and I were talking about this concept of contempt being really the biggest problem facing the country. And I joined Unite, and they had just been working on this, reading this book together called Dignity by Donna Hicks. And she talked about how dignity is really the problem solver. Donna Hicks is a renowned conflict resolution specialist her career was spent all over the globe, working in war-torn countries and working in severe conflict. And she worked with Desmond Tutu in Northern Ireland. And after that interaction and that work with Bishop Tutu, he said, Donna, you need to write a book about what you're doing. And so she wrote a book called Dignity, and how dignity was the key to solving some of these intractable problems. So the contempt side that, we were talking about being the problem, dignity being the problem solver, that started to coalesce in our minds in our work with Unite. And throughout the rest of that year, and then especially early in 2021, we started to come up with this idea of highlighting the news through lens of people that were using dignity to solve problems, and came up with this idea of the Dignity Index.
I think it's brilliant. And Rabbi, I always like to ask him the theoretical questions. That was easy to say. Rabbi, what does all of this have to do with ethics, sir?
Well, I think it has everything to do with ethics, because when you bore down, where does the obligation to be ethical come from? It comes from recognizing our collective humanity, our individual humanity. If you see an animal in the wild attack another animal, you don't think, oh my goodness, how can that wolf act that way? Because that's its nature, and that's its environment, and that's expected. But human beings, we have a spark of the divine in us, and that calls on us to conduct ourselves at a higher plane. And that human dignity is ultimately what obligates us in all of our undertakings. So it's critically important and relevant to ethics.
And that's why he's my favorite rabbi. All right, so back to you then. I love all of your materials online, and you have a beautiful statement about what we believe. So maybe we start with there. What do you believe in terms of your dignity movement?
So, well, we believe, for one thing, the index itself, we believe that words matter. We believe that what we say to and about each other can lead to peacemaking, can lead to problem solving, it can ease divisions, or it can lead to violence. We also believe that everyone belongs. We believe that everyone has, as the rabbi said, the spark of divinity within us, and we are all we have inherent dignity by the fact that we are members of the human race. In my religion, we are brothers and sisters, literally brothers and spirit brothers and sisters. So we believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity by the mere fact of their humanity. And so those core beliefs drive our work. And I wanted to go back to something that the rabbi said, which is this spark of divinity. And we've talked a lot about conscience being a driver for the change that people make when they realize through the index or through, some of the things that they're seeing take place in problem-solving organizations, when they realize that they might be part of the problem, they realize that they're also part of the solution. And it's our conscience that acts upon us to say, wait a second, I think I'm doing that, and I don't think it's right. And that conscience helps turn us from being part of the problem into being part of the solution. And that's one of the exciting things we found about the Dignity Index, is that people are saying, I didn't realize that was me. I talked to my husband that way, or I think that way about Democrats or Republicans. I didn't realize I was being contemptuous in my remarks.
Looking at your website, there's so much here that is just inspirational and aspirational, but there's one line that really resonated with me. It says, mutual dignity is a given, respect and trust are earned. And I think that we have a problem in that we conflate these concepts. And well, if I don't find you, I don't find your ideas, I don't find your positions, I don't find your behavior worthy of respect, then you aren't worthy of dignity. Mm-hmm. And that's where we get into so much trouble. That's where the acrimony comes from. That's where the vitriol and the shaming and the language of combativeness comes from. That if dignity is a given, then we can talk about trust and respect, and we can find out where that has to come from. But if we can't treat each other with dignity, then we're never going to get to those stages, because we're going to shut down beforehand.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes to one of the criticisms that we hear sometimes is you guys just want everyone to be nice to each other and agree all the time. You just want everyone to be the same. It's like, no. The diversity is fantastic. And the diversity in our cultures and our thinking and our beliefs, I think that adds to better problem solving. I know in my experience as a policymaker, it adds to better policy. So it's not about agreeing on everything and uniting to be the same. It's uniting over this principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. And I think, as you've so beautifully stated, that's the starting point. Then we can talk about these things that we adamantly disagree on, because we're doing it with dignity for that other person.
So let's talk about dignity. Let's say the listener has an organization. How do they know where they are on your dignity index?
Well, you can go to our website. I love having a chance to plug our website. So if you go to our website, which is dignityindex.us, we have on the website the section called the index. We walk you through this tool, which is a 1 through 8 scale. That's really, it's a shorthand. And this is what a lot of people have responded so positively to, is that they said, it's easier for me to remember this. I can see it just so simply. So steps 1 through 4 are on the contempt end of the scale. 1 is the lowest, and that's where you're escalating really from violent words to violent actions. And the other side is less than human. So we can do whatever we want to them, including violence. This is where genocide happens. 1 through 4 is the contempt side. And you move up the scale, you get to the dignity side, which is 5 through 8. And that's where you start to change your perception. It's like, okay, I may not agree with that person, but they have a right to be here. They have a right to their opinion, and I'll listen to their point of view. 5, 6, 7, 8 moves you up to where, wow, not only do you have a right to be here, but I kind of want to hear about your views, because I want to find those areas that we agree on, which is kind of a 6 behavior. 7 is, I want to find out those areas where we don't agree. I want to learn more about how we don't agree, because once I learn about those disagreements, I can understand why you came to that thinking. And again, let's put this in a problem solving framework. Now I can solve a problem. If I'm a school board member, or if I'm a city council member, if I'm just working in an organization, as you said, Marguerite, I can say, wow, this other person's making me crazy. They don't want to do it my way. Well, let's talk about where we agree, and let's talk about where we disagree and how you came to that. And now that puts us in this lens where we can solve problems together. And then 8, speaking of Bishop Tutu, I always think that he is my model 8, where you kind of lose this attachment to being right. You love and cherish your group or people that you interact with, but you also see the humanity and dignity in everyone, and you can talk with anyone and find something of value or worth in that conversation, in that interaction with someone else. So we treat people with dignity no matter what. That's the 8 level. I'm striving for there. I'm not going to tell you where I'm at because it fluctuates day by day, but I think that's where it's an aspirational goal for all of us.
When you talk about not having to be right, you just reminded me of a silly little incident. I was sitting at a table with a group of people, and one fellow sitting next to me turns to me and says, "How old are you? You can't be older than I am." And I said, "Okay." And that was the reaction from the table. Well, it turned out I was older than you, but who,
Yeah.
This is something I'm going to pick a fight over.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of, I came to this country as a refugee and was taken in, by my best friend's family. They were Southern. I moved to Florida, but they were from a Southern area. And the mama, when she disagreed with us, would sometimes say, "Don't make me revoke your birth certificate." Talk about a cancel culture. And apparently that was a Southern phrase, which I just adore. Don't make me revoke it. And I just love that idea. So it's nope. It's interesting. All right, so now
if I'm right, I'm right, sometimes I don't need to assert that. I mean, I used to have a personality quirk that I corrected people's grammar all the time.
I never heard you do that with me, Rabbi. Never.
Well, you're my co-host. I need to hold you to a higher standard. But the truth is, as people's grammar gets worse and worse, I get a little more mature, after 20 or 30 years or 40, but it doesn't need to be done.
No, it doesn't.
It's not important to correct everything you hear that's not right.
We have to get over our OCD or automatic reaction to be ever so helpful to the spirit of listening. And it's hard for all of us, it's interesting. All right, so now let's get to the Dignity Pledge.
Okay.
I love it. And I had one concern. I feel very protective of your organization because I love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Coming to this country as a refugee, I got beat up quite a bit when I was little for being Cuban and for being non-white. And I had interesting learning experiences that have changed my worldview, including how I may be limited in my acceptance of others as well. As Rabbi may know, I'm never short an opinion. So working on that. So my biggest concern about your Dignity Pledge is, how can I, as a sound human being, sign it when the first one is, I pledge and commit to, number 1, always be kind. Well, I've already failed. So help us understand that, because I want everyone to understand the aspirational nature of your pledge.
Yeah. So if you go on the website and you click on like right up front, we're going to get you. We want you to take this pledge. But we try to frame this Dignity Pledge in the fact that, and as the pledge states, there's no America without democracy, and there's no democracy without healthy debate. There's no healthy debate without dignity. So we ask people to pledge to treat others with dignity and not contempt. And that is very aspirational, especially, let me just back up for a second. When we talk about the index, we talk about applying it in moments of disagreement. And it's really meant to measure what we do when we're hurt or we're angry or in these areas of disagreement. And so the time when we want you to apply it most is the most difficult time to apply it. So it is aspirational. And if you think about it, we all daily probably wake up saying, I'm going to do a little bit better on that one thing. I lost my temper on the freeway and I honked at that guy. I think I called him an idiot. I'm going to do a little bit better today. And incrementally, if we can look at the pledge as kind of incrementally, it's like, I'm going to do my best to stop the contempt and to treat people with more dignity and less contempt. I have to tell you, some of the feedback that we've had that has come in after people start to hear about us is so inspiring. I want to read you a little comment that I had on social media, where this woman had said, and this was a couple of days after she had read an article in Political magazine, and she said, I just texted an organization whose position I support. However, I felt that their communication vilified elected officials to raise funds. I recommended that they review the Dignity Index, evaluate their contemptuous marketing, and align their messaging with their values and increase dignity. So it's like this woman that, maybe took the pledge, maybe she didn't, but she saw it, she noticed that what an organization she supported was using contempt, and she did something about it. She sent them a message. We had another message shortly after that from a woman who said, I've got to watch myself on Facebook. I realize this is what I'm doing. I get so worked up when this kind of message is being posted. I'm going to practice and I'm going to try to do better. And so those are the types of actions that we hope people will take, even just from signing the pledge and having now in your mind this like, ooh, I pledge to do better. Today's a bad day, but tomorrow I will do better. And let me think of a way that I could do that.
But how can I sign? So back to me being devil's advocate, how can I sign a pledge that I know I can never achieve? I know you have something to say, and the rabbi has something to say on that.
You remind me of this little experiment that we are running within the core members of our movement that are leading, kind of this work that we're doing on the Dignity Index. We are experimenting with a group called Dividers Anonymous. We're basing it on the 12-step programs of other Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and the language is very much the same, which is, I have a problem and I'm going to notice that problem. And every week, this is painful sometimes, because every week in our small group meeting, we talk about where we succeeded that week, where we failed that week. And there are times, last week I even said, look, I knew I was speaking with contempt, and I knew I was going to have to confess it to my Dividers Anonymous group. And I did it anyway. And I said, I'm not going to do that next week. But the difference being, you can be 12 years sober. We think it's probably impossible to be 12 years or maybe even a day or a week without having some of these thoughts and feelings and interactions where we are not fully in the dignity realm. We know that's going to happen, but we are experimenting with this group that just keeps it top of mind for us. So I feel like I'm going to sign the pledge, and then I'm going to repent, and I'm going to do better. And every interaction I have, I'm going to think, ooh, I'm going to have to talk about this with my group. Or, ooh, what did I rate on the scale? I'll get messages from text threads that I'm in who they'll say something funny or snarky, and then they'll say, oh, Tami, wait, was that a 4 on the dignity scale? It's like, you better believe it was a 4 on the dignity scale. So even having this scale kind of stuck in our minds helps remind us that there is a better way, that we're all human. And so, I mean, if you're a perfectionist and you feel like I can never live up to that, then that might not be the thing for you to sign. But if you're a striver like we are, and feel like, I'm going to try, I'll pledge to do better. I'm not going to be perfect, but I can do better.
Well, it's not just about perfectionism and striving, it's about the language. And I think if we understand that pledge can be aspirational and not a commitment. Rabbi, you have something perfect to say about this whole thing about undertaking a task. Sir?
Well, it's not really what I have to say.
Well, you're sharing the wisdom of the sages.
Yeah, in our classical ethical treatise, Ethics of Fathers, the sages say it's not incumbent upon you to finish the job, but neither are you free to withdraw from it. So what is the job? The job is fulfilling 100% of my personal potential. That's my job in this world. Well, how many of us are actually going to do that? Right? One moment of inattention, one loss of temper, I have now squandered that moment's worth of potential, and I'll never get it back. So neither am I free to withdraw from it. I need that aspirational bar that I am continuously striving to reach, knowing I'm never going to reach it, and yet never giving up the effort. And, Tami, when you mentioned, I'll make a mistake and then I'll repent, the concept of repentance in Judaism, the word for repentance is tshuva, which really means return. Returning to the straight path. Because, and as much of a cliche as this is, it is entirely true that the journey is the destination. We are not in life to get to the finish line. We are in life to run the race. And that means continuously expecting more from ourselves. And knowing we're going to fail, knowing we're going to slip back, and then recovering, making a new commitment. Where did I go wrong? Right? When I go to sleep at night, what did I do today that I could have done better? When I wake up in the morning, what must I do today to be better? And just having that front of mind as much as possible, we will become better people over the course of our lives.
That's beautiful.
And that's, I think, what your pledge is. It's that commitment to constantly try to do better.
And I think, Tami, you were saying that you were urging people to use this when they need it most, in the midst of a crisis of dignity or contempt, when they're in the gray area, of behaving in a way that's useful or not useful to the world or to themselves. And that's where we get emotional and moral intelligence. By living within that portal, that nexus between doing it with dignity or doing something with contempt. I love that you chose it that way. I think it's a brilliant system.
I find that when I'll see something on the news in particular, or something that's happening maybe in my community, and when I get the urge to roll my eyes, which Dr. Gottman and Arthur Brooks talks about this in his book, that's the sign of contempt. When I get the urge to roll my eyes and go, what in the crap are they thinking? I mean, that's my signal to say, okay, time out. Let's look at this. And I try to go to the scale. And if I can get to a 5 and not in the contempt area, which the 4 is, I don't trust those people. They're incompetent. They're fools. If I can just get myself to a 5 and stay at a 5, then I relax a little bit and say, okay, let me figure out, is it true? What I'm reading, is it actually true? Let me find out where that motivation is coming from. And often you'll find that what was the spark for someone to say something or do something that I think is egregious really makes a lot of sense when you find out where they're coming from. So yeah, the eye rolling for me, that's my signal. It's like, calm down.
What are some
righteous
other
indignation? Righteous indignation feels so good.
Yeah. It does. It's almost as good as chocolate. I mean, really.
So close. Well, I'm going to say, Rabbi, that a lot of people, they mask their contempt with righteous indignation. It's like, oh no, it's not contempt. I have a right to be, I'm patriotic. And they mask their contempt through that language of patriotism or righteous indignation. And so that's something that we also have to peel away, really, that mask, and see it for what it really is.
Well, it just occurs to me that indignation is the opposite of dignity, isn't it?
It is.
There you go.
Coming to this country as a refugee, one of my pet peeves in this whole world of dignity is the whole free speech thing. And it's true, as Americans, we have every right to be a jerk and to be dangerous with our language. It's our right. But as members of a democratic republic, we have an obligation to inspire others with our words to productive solutions. And the first part of a solution is understanding all the edges of differences, right? So we have to go to the area of contempt. It's a gift. It lets us know where an area of difference exists, right? So if we're too scared to go into the land of contempt, we'll never get the dignity. We have to look at it with faith that somehow it will be useful. And I think you do that well.
Well, and I think people, another criticism that we've heard off and on is you just want to use the dignity index to shut us up. You want to cancel us. And it's actually what we've come to realize is that contempt shuts people up. I mean, if you want to have an open conversation and not cancel people, then let's be open. Let's treat people with dignity and have that feedback. But when you start showing contempt and speaking with contempt, people shut down. And I had this experience when I was serving on the city council, and I would chair a meeting with a public hearing, and there'd be a lot of heated discussion. We had rules, and the rules were, I would say, no applause, not only no booing, but no applause either, because when you start to show favoritism, you're shutting down someone that may want to come to the mic with a different opinion. And you want that opinion. You don't want people to feel like they are marginalized. And when you use contemptuous language, or in the case of even some of these public hearings, when you've got a crowd of people really animated about one side, and it can turn to booing, but you're shutting down free speech. I want to hear free speech, and contempt shuts that down, which is why we favor dignity over contempt.
The other thing that shuts us down is, I'm looking at what you're saying that people saying was cancel culture, that you're trying to shut us up. I think they're misunderstanding that assessment, which requires the self-discipline to really look at ourselves or have reflection, judgment-free reflection is assessment at its best, correct? But it also requires discipline, which is also shuts us down, because we can't just do whatever we want. Those sophisticated moral and emotional and behavioral principles are not cancel culture. It's actually a dignity behavior.
It's humanity, right?
It is humanity. It's what's required of us. As my mother would have said in Spanish, mijita no. Don't do that. And there's
no.
Mijita no. My little daughter, no.
Yeah, mijita.
Mijita no. And I think that when we're looking at the index for ourselves, I looked at your index and I thought, oh, could do better than that. Oh, okay. How do I do better than that? Oh, all right. And I found myself rolling my eyes. Okay. And I think that we have to have a sense of humor and a sense of love for ourselves and for the process. And I think the dignity index does have that. You don't come across like judgmental people in ugly brown shoes. You don't.
The whole term free speech is, I think it needs reflection, because if something's free, that also implies it's worthless. If we have the freedom to speak as we choose, but we have the responsibility to be disciplined in the way we speak. And one of the terms that's we hear a lot of these days is self-censorship. And I censor myself all the time. And I don't use profanity. I think it's inconsistent with a rabbinic persona. It doesn't mean I don't feel like swearing once in a while, but I choose not to, because I don't think it's going to be beneficial. On the other hand, self-censorship is used in cases where people feel afraid to speak up. So the same term, depending on the context, can either be something that promotes meaningful discourse or shuts it down.
Promotes dignity or contempt.
Well, and to your point, Marguerite, on the scale, like when you see yourself in a 3 or a 4, the beauty, I think, of the scale is it's all in front of you, and you're not always a 3, you're not always a 4, you're not always a 7, we move back and forth in these levels, depending on the context, the circumstance, and how deeply angry or afraid that we might be about a particular incident. But it allows us to see ourselves always being able to move up or to do better or to handle something differently, and also to see ourselves as human, and know that we may land there, occasionally. But I think once we see the impact that it has on others, and to your point, Rabbi, when we start to self-censor because we are not feeling like we're in a place that's going to listen to our input, when we know how that feels, to be in that position where we can't speak because we fear the contemptuous reaction or that it's not going to make a difference, then it opens us up to be able to offer that to someone else, to offer the dignity and the openness to someone else.
I think that's beautifully put, but we could talk to you forever. All right, so now I think, Rabbi, we're going to do the word for the day. And when we come back, we're going to ask Tami about a personal adventure she's looking forward to and give us some final words of wisdom for her amazing dignity movement. Rabbi?
The word of the day is reification. Reification, which is the act of treating something abstract, such as an idea, relation, system, quality, etc., as if it were a concrete object. And here again, we have a concept that can be positive or negative. Because if you have I'm a philosopher, I live in the world of ideas, and I have to be very disciplined to bring those ideas down to the practical. That's why the doctor and I are such good partners, because she's much more focused on making things actionable and practical. And so it makes for a good team. That we have to take those concepts and apply them in a way that's concrete, otherwise they remain amorphous. However, if we take that too far, if we think that every concept can be distilled into something that is solely pragmatic, then we end up oversimplifying. And we lose the texture, we lose the nuance, we lose the sense of gray that we have to grapple with if we want to be ethical. So another meaning of reification can be the act of treating a person as a thing, or objectification. So that's often something that we see in this type of situation, where you are your opinion in my eyes, and consequently, since I invalidate your opinion, I invalidate you. So as with so many things, we have to achieve a balance. We have to be able to bring the abstract into our lives in a practical way, but we also have to retain that sense of fluidity, because the uncertainties of life and the difference of perspectives are such that we're going to have to deal with complexities, with tension, with disagreement. But if we can make that disagreement constructive, then we can move forward in a positive way.
Wow. Tami, you see what you
Love
inspired.
that.
He chose the word for you.
I love that. Thank you.
If the word fits, I think that's a great word
Use
for
it.
you. All right. So what adventure are you looking forward to on a personal level? Because we know that people who want to make a difference in the world must engage in self-care, and fun and things we're excited about are a good part of self-care. So ma'am, what you got?
So I used to sing in the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, formerly known as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I sang in the choir for 7 years. And last September, I finished my service singing in the choir, but now I work with external relations for the choir, still part of a volunteer assignment. And I welcome special guests to the choir and help make these arrangements. And the choir is going on a tour this summer to Mexico City.
Ooh,
And
okay.
so I will be going with the choir and doing some of what I do with working with special guests of the choir and VIPs, and just this experience, getting people to experience the choir. I will be doing some of that with the choir when we go on tour to Mexico City. So I'm super excited about that.
Oh, you're
That
going to
does
love
sound exciting.
That's wonderful. We'll let them know to watch out for you. They'll see the positive wave of energy and go, woof, what just happened to our atmosphere?
There you go.
So that'll be good. Well, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. All right. So final last words for our listeners and viewers. What can they do to change how they think, feel, or do around the issue of dignity?
So we would love to have your listeners join the movement. Really, go to our website. It's dignityindex.us, and you can either take the pledge, or you can go at the bottom of the homepage and just sign up for the newsletters that we send out every few weeks. We're trying to make this really an interactive group to where people can send us their ideas. We've gotten a lot of ideas on how to build this movement, but the first step, I think, is to look at the scale, kind of internalize what that means, and then just start to see places every day where you could apply the index in your family, in your organization, in the social media that you consume or don't consume, and start to see where again, with our conscience, where we realize that we might be contributing to the problem, but then we are the solution to the problem. And then just join this movement of us, of people that do, back to your introduction, that want to change the world.
Or are changing the world.
Are changing the world.
Are changing the world.
And changing it for the better.
Yeah.
We hope
Well,
so.
thanks. I guess there is a positive and negative. Thanks, Rabbi.
Yes.
Thank you that you gave that a direction. I appreciate this.
Well, Tami, it's been absolutely delightful. Thank you for joining us, and we're already looking to when we can schedule to have you back again. And the work you're doing really is inspirational, aspirational, and you should continue to have tremendous success with it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I always get nervous, and then I come on and meet people, and it's like, this is delightful. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
We're
it's been
delighted
wonderful.
that you could join us.
And Doctor,
Thank
what's
you.
your last word for the day?
Well, as a psychologist and as a protective mother and grandmother, I'm going to ask people, if you want to have more dignity, ask yourself, where do you feel that you're given most grace of dignity? And where are you giving most of the grace of dignity? I'm Catholic, obviously, so I think of grace. So start first with what's really working. And then ask yourself, how are you blocking dignity? And then the worst case is, how are you inspiring contempt? So I would look at it from the positive to the more closed down, so that we don't invite shame to the table. So I do believe that your dignity movement is about everyone working together in a productive and healthy environment. And we are just delighted that you could join us. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your wisdom. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, this has been an episode of the Rabbi and the Shrink, and join us for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Rabbi and the Shrink, Everyday Ethics Unscripted. To book Dr. Red Shoe, Dr. Margarita Gurri, or Rabbi Yonason Goldson as speakers or advisors for your organization, contact them at therabbiandtheshrink.com. This has been a Dr. Red Shoe production.